2. And we're live back here again with Astrid Mueller. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for episode 2 of the Dream Achiever series. Astrid and I just recorded a fantastic podcast for about an hour talking about dreams and trust and faith and joy and play and possibilities. And I am so grateful to get to sit here and share your message live with our friends on Facebook. And I would like to introduce my friend Astrid Mueller. She's the author of this fantastic, amazing book, Permission to Sparkle. I've played with and read a good chunk of this book. I've worked with her personally, individually on her own, and she is a wealth of information and so much fun to work with. Astrid, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I'm so honored and excited to be here, and also about what you're doing in the world to support you and a world empowered. I love it.
Thank you so much. Well, why don't we tell the people a little bit about you, what you do, and your background, and then we'll get into some of the talking points that we sparkled upon during our podcast.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm originally from Switzerland, hence the name Müller in
Mueller.
Swiss German. Müller. Yes. And I followed my heart to move to the US and emigrated here. I live in Alaska right now. My superpowers for business that I help others with are design and brand strategy. And I'm a catalyst of joy. So I help people do bigger impact from the heart and make their life and their business more sparkly and everything lighter and more magical.
You certainly are that. You are a conduit for joy and creativity and play. And that's one of the things that I love so much about this book. It's not just a diatribe on what to do or mindset. There are so many activities, like every other page is a let's play, let's find our joy, let's step into our creativity, let's remember our childlike selves. And it's so much fun to go through this and to get to know you. One of the things that really jumped out to me during our podcast conversation was the importance of tapping in and listening to what our heart says. Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
expand a little bit about that and how important listening to our heart is in following our dreams to achieve our dreams and live our sparkle life?
Yeah, well, what shall I say? If we don't follow our heart, it hurts. It hurts. And yeah, I am sure everybody can relate to that. And sometimes we just take a little bit longer to realize what our heart is saying because we might not be used to hearing it, or we give more power to what others are saying or what we think we should be doing. But every time I did listen to my heart, even if things were scary, magic happened. And adventure always unfolded to something more magical than before. And I found more superpowers too. So, yeah,
In
there's
my
a big
in my
topic.
experience, not listening to my heart meant that I wasn't on the path. And if I wasn't on the
Mhm.
path, then the universe was about to intervene. And, the universe would start with a little prompt and a poke, and eventually would end up with a shove. And sooner or later, the 2x4 comes to help knock us back onto the path. So, in my experience, listening to the heart is super important. Um, One of the things that you mentioned was listening to others.
Mhm.
Not being able to listen to our hearts is usually an expression of paying too close attention and paying too much heed and credence on what other people think, what other people say. Could you expand a little bit on that and what kind of popped up for us during our podcast?
So I believe that we talked about I had a long time in my life where I gave my power to other people and just giving more, like really not believing in myself and trusting my own wisdom and actually doing what other people thought was best for me. And when we're kids, that's good. But when parents, I mean, when parents are have our safety in mind, and like there are times where it makes sense and is useful to do that. But it took me quite a while, and it was a learning curve for me in this lifetime to actually find my power. By contrast, by not having my power at first and not claiming it at first, and so that burned me quite a ways because when I just did what others recommended. In particular, I had a best friend back then. I just really adored her. I was like, "Oh, you know better than me. Why don't you just tell me? I want to learn from you." And I literally like gave her like, "Oh, here, tell me where to go." And when I then took action inspired by that, and something went wrong, and oh my gosh, and then it wasn't even my decision, and it felt bad, and like there was even an instance where I did that, and then afterward she was like, "Why did you do that?" And I'm like, "You told me to." And then and then it's like this ridiculous conversation of like, wait a minute, am I living my life, or what is going on here? Like, at least if I fall on my face, I want to make it, I want it to be my decision, and that I learn my own thing and I have my own responsibility from it. Yeah.
That's hard sometimes though, isn't it? Like if things don't turn out well and it's because we listened to somebody else and we followed somebody else's advice, then we can say, well, I wanted to go this way and you told me to go that way. And that's why things went poorly. If it's our own heart and our own intuition and we follow that and it doesn't work out, then we only have ourselves to blame. And sometimes that's really hard to accept, to embrace that, we're the creator of our outcomes.
Yeah, but you know what? Like having experienced the other way, it was really, really hard and ridiculous to have it the other way. Like where if I live something and I do something that doesn't feel good, then it didn't feel double because it wasn't even my choice. And in other times in my life when I did something where I made a mistake, quote unquote, or something that I wouldn't have done again, then it was my choice. Then it felt only half as bad if it at least was my choice. And then I can look back and like, oh, that was a learning curve, and great. So I learned this, and oh yeah, that wasn't nice, and oh whatever, So
Why do you think it felt better when it was your choice?
well, because we're meant to walk on our own freaking feet. you know? Um Yeah, I'm not a robot. We're not meant to be robots. We're meant to be intelligent in the sense of like using all our magic, right? Like our heart, our minds, like all of us, we're all unique and we're meant to thrive. And I wasn't thriving when I just walked on somebody else's ideas. And I don't want to say that it's wrong to listen to others. It's great to be inspired. Like if we're like, oh, we can learn from others, right? But I took it too far in many instances when I was younger. And even sometimes with coaches, like not trusting myself enough to be able to hold the energy of something and just to stand there and do something, even if it's scary. Because every time I do that now, then it makes me stronger by doing it. And we always grow. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're meant to live in our own autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, in collaboration somehow, but in our own autonomy, yes.
yeah, and when we are living by making our own choices, then that's empowering. Even if it doesn't necessarily work out the way that we thought it would, we can say, "Well, I made the choice," which means next time I can make a different choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What would you say are some of the greatest challenges that are keeping people stuck, keeping people from achieving their dreams, keeping people from living their sparkle lives? What do you think is
Mhm.
the biggest thing holding people back from getting what they want out of life?
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions you hit on in our interview earlier that I encourage everybody to check out. It was really deep and awesome. So, what came up for me there was that a lot of times nowadays, especially, um, people don't think for themselves. It's like we're really encouraged to not think for ourselves. Actually, there's all these media and there's negativity happening in the world and fear mongering and like, oh, don't do this, and like rallying people against each other and whatnot. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now for everybody, to actually come back to ourselves and to listen to our heart, to our intuition, and to just kind of take a quiet moment regardless of what anybody else says, and find our own truth. And that's what my book actually empowers to, because you constantly have this curiosity about, what are your mind stories, what are your own stories, what is your real truth, which always comes from here. And like we have higher wisdom too, not just our physical human heart, but higher wisdom also, and universe support. And we have to hear that to make really decisions that we stand behind, and that are magical, and that are also soulful, and come from that quiet, heart-centered Zen place. It's really easy to fall off that when we just look at what others are saying, right? Like, so just following that is just a high challenge right now, especially in today's times. So find back to your heart, people.
Yeah, one of the things that I love so much about your book is how it keeps reiterating the importance of play and
Mhm.
tapping into that child self. Will you expand a little bit on your experience with that and how important play and tapping into your inner child is for creating your dreams and living your sparkle
Yeah.
life?
Yeah. So it's funny. It's contrary to what we are often used to think, when we play and when we tap into our childlike innocence and like enjoy ourselves, get creative, that's when we actually get our best ideas. It's so funny. We're so often we think, oh, but I have to be grown up and I have to find a smart answer, right? But creativity really helps me to open up and consider my whole being, and then my mind can come in and bring its own brilliance in carrying out those brilliant ideas that I got when I listened to my heart. And specifically, I use intuitive drawings and the alchemy of design, that I also help clients and people in my program with, to find my answers from my heart, and the people find their own. And the fun thing is that when we do that, when we draw, and often with our eyes closed, and then you look at the drawings, they don't make sense to the mind. And you actually, because they don't make sense to the mind, you get to decode them, and you look at them with curiosity in unusual ways where your mind isn't used to thinking. And then you find the answers from the heart and your higher self. You really feel like, oh, that's what it is. And you find uh, different perspectives and different paths forwards, and what really feels good to you and what really lights you up. That's
Why
how
do you
creative.
think it works that way? Why do you think closing your eyes and drawing intuitively helps you arrive at the answers and the inspirations that people are seeking?
Well, one reason I think is because it's literally like when you train your muscles, then your muscles get bigger, and when we train certain neural pathways in our brain, then they become more frequently accessed and easier accessed. And so, if we close our eyes, for instance, we use different pathways to hear answers. That's one thing. And then we draw. We cannot make sense in what we draw when we close our eyes. So you might think you draw a star, but when you open your eyes, it will look like a smiley face or whatever, right?
Okay.
So it helps you literally get out of your conscious practical mind that you always use, and you can bypass that and access your full wisdom and your zone of genius.
Are you saying that logic is overrated?
No, it's logic is absolutely needed and essential, but there's a time and place for everything. And if it's the only thing that we use only of our brilliance.
So, what would you say has been the most important lesson that you've learned in your life? You've traveled abroad, you've picked up your entire life, changed careers, moved to Alaska of all places, um, decided to write this book. Now you're a coach. What would you say has been the greatest lesson that you've learned in your life?
Well, I get to say like life is an adventure and you just gotta embrace it. Yeah, we can fight it, or and we can stay where we're at, not following our heart, or embrace the adventure. And it's always an adventure anyway. Even if we stay where we're at and don't change anything, you don't know everything that's going to happen. So yeah, I think embracing the adventure, and the more I have done that, the more it led me to more superpowers. And like, I mean, I had my recent cancer healing journey, right? That was a gigantic adventure. And I'm still on it, and I still don't know all the details and like whatnot. But uh yeah, embracing the adventure. I think that's a yeah, that's an answer that comes to me.
Perfect.
It also means to walk in your power, right? It's like that you're choosing to sit on that train and to actually take the steering wheel, as opposed to just kind of letting things happen and watch.
Right? At
Yeah.
least looking at things with curiosity, right?
Mhm.
Whatever's going on in life, looking at it with curiosity and saying, okay, what am I meant to learn? How is this meant to benefit me? I truly believe, like Napoleon Hill said, within every setback or difficulty lies a seed of equal or greater success. Um,
Mm, nice.
our job is to look at what happens with curiosity and ask, what am I meant to learn? How is this meant to help me? Everything happens for a reason. Everything is to our benefit. So if this is happening, how did I create it? And what am I meant to learn from it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I don't know if we already mentioned that in this live, but curiosity is actually the first key that I give everybody in the book to in every situation to find forward and be curious about your mind stories, and like and the more we practice that, the more we can then choose potentially to let things go, or to choose more empowering mindsets, or different habits of like, and by habit I don't mean necessarily doing something the same way all the time, which is that goes against my grain as a creative person. But by habits I mean how we take care of, like habits of talking to ourselves internally. Am I talking in a loving way to myself, or am I being my biggest bully, which I used to be? Things like that. So yeah, the
Yeah, one
more.
of the things that we talked about in the podcast was, paying close attention to the inner stories
Yeah.
and how fear inhibits living our sparkle life, how fear causes us to contract and shrink,
Mm-hmm.
and living in optimism and curiosity in that childlike state causes us to expand
Yeah.
and to create.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us more about the inner stories, listening to those inner stories and living from fear, because you talked about that in the book quite a bit as well.
Yeah, so I feel that the way I, when I started my life and kind of moved forward, I at first I was kind of living in a lot of fear mindsets. Like there were a bunch of things, like especially from Switzerland, is a very kind of structured society of like, oh, you should be having a sensible job. And like, so my first job was actually working for a bank after, yeah, like longer job. And I worked at a stock exchange where people were yelling at each other, which is ridiculous to where I'm at now, the contrast. And yeah, and I had to let go those that thinking of like, no, I actually have to follow my heart, and I had to break through some of these thoughts that I'm not safe, and that I have to have a certain income. Like I gave up like my retirement to invest in myself, like things like that, right? Like letting go, letting go, letting go. And the more I did that and following my heart, then the more power I actually found after it. And the more I thrive. Like ironically, you would think like, oh my gosh, she's gonna die. She's not gonna have enough money or whatever. All those stories that I had, and they were holding me back before of doing what I really want to do in this life, which is inspire the whole freaking planet
Right?
and
What are
thrive.
some of the stories that you think other people tell themselves that are disempowering, that cause them to contract and not live their ideal life?
Oh, well, so first of all, I don't want to tell people what they're thinking. Like, I want people to pause with this question and ask yourself, like, what are you telling yourself often? And just become curious of what might be like. And it might even be like when the first time you look in the mirror in the morning, like, what are you telling yourself? And I know for women, like a lot of that I had, and that I saw others also have, is like, I'm not good enough. It's like the self judgment and all the things, like, I don't know enough. I'm not good enough. Like, I'm not worthy enough. I can't ask enough. I can't ask that money. I need to lose weight, gain weight, whatever, change that. The not enough, I think, is a big one. But I'm sure there's others out there that are more
Yeah, that's
relevant.
one of the things that I talk about a lot when I'm addressing addiction and suicide prevention is that INGE disease, that I'm not good enough disease. I think it's
Mm,
pervasive in this culture. And all we see in social media is, people sitting on Lamborghinis and flying jets, and we
mm,
think everybody's life is so much better than ours, and all it does is deflate our self-esteem. And most people, I think, live in that state of not being good enough. When I was a
mm,
kid growing up, mom, I'm sorry if you're listening. A lot of my issues and my self-esteem challenges, and the reason that I had suicidal ideation is, B's weren't good enough. They needed to be A's. One goal in soccer wasn't good
mm.
enough. I needed to have two. If I had an interception in football,
Oh,
I should
wow.
run it back for a touchdown. And it kind of imparted upon me this belief that nothing I ever did was ever going to be good enough. And
Mm.
what play activities, as we wrap up this live stream, in your book would you suggest would be beneficial to overcoming the not good enough disease?
Mm. Look for one. Okay, first of all, I use a book with bibliomancy. So that's one way you can use a book. You just kind of ask a question like, what is most useful for me to see right now? And then you just go like this and you point your finger somewhere and whatever it says, and you become curious what it means to you right now. And most likely, the universe guides you to a spot that it really pertains to you at this moment. But before saying this, in your question, like, I actually encourage then, if it's the case for you, like you discover something deeper there, like really allow yourself to go deep and do a deep dive, and that's also in that book, to really look at, well, what's behind that story, and what's the word happened there, and what did you tell yourself? What's the first time that you told yourself that story? Is like, for you, it was probably like somewhere early in the childhood. You didn't even you made up a story as a child what it would mean about you, right? But that's not necessarily what your mom even intended with that. She tried to thrive, right? Whatever. So you're like,
Right.
oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not that. So then the cool thing with the curiosity and sparkle game is like, when we catch that what we told ourselves, then we can let it go. We're like, oh, that's not even true. And of course I'm loved. And of course it doesn't even matter. So,
I
so
don't
yeah,
even believe this. This is somebody else's shit. Yes.
yeah. Or it wasn't even a story in the first place. It was a misunderstanding that a child didn't understand better. Like, I had things like that, a lot of them, that I also, um, yeah, I also discovered and let go.
One of the things that we talked about in the podcast was the importance of awe, wonder, curiosity, and living in infinite possibility. How do we help people get back into that state where
Hmm.
all things are possible? Because honestly, I mean, inspiration and empowerment are really fleeting and kind of a rare commodity these days, especially what's going on socially and globally. Being optimistic and being empowered and living in that state where all things are still possible. How do you recommend people get back to that?
Okay. So my book is called Permission to Sparkle. So the meaning of the title is like, we have to give ourselves permission to sparkle. That's the thing.
Step one.
Um, it's literally the first thing, like, giving myself permission to become curious, to make my life more sparkly, and then playing that sparkle game and coming back on the sparkle path, which is where we walk empowered. And then when we start feeling constricted, of like, oh, something feels heavy, I don't feel good about this, then we can use the curiosity game to catch, okay, so I'm in shadowland, I'm off the sparkle path, what's going on, what am I telling myself, like, and then, like, we can come back again. So I think I lost your question, but I think I answered it somewhere.
I think you did too. Um, I would like to invite our community to connect with you. How do people get in touch with Astrid Mueller?
You see it in the ticker below. It's astridmueller.com. I have a world of sparkle waiting for you, whether it's for your life and different options. You can work with me. There's also freebies and goodies, and the book.
The book, the game, your coaching, it's all phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing with our community. I hope that this message has helped somebody, empowered somebody. They're reinvigorated with a little bit of hope and optimism that they can create their dreams and live their sparkle life. If you've liked anything that we've had to share, go please listen to the podcast on A World Empowered Dialogues. And if you feel like supporting A World Empowered, please do so through our Patreon or purchase one of the Dream Achiever books. It would mean a lot. I love you all. Thank you
By
so
the way.
much. Thank you, Astrid. I
Thank
appreciate you
you.
for taking the time to share these messages with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, and everybody. Thank you for being here, and keep sparkling. Find your sparkle.
Take care, guys.